Hello and welcome to this episode of Roots of the Valley. I'm your host, John Franklin, and this week we are going to be speaking about the Capitol Theater. I'm here with Charlie Robin, who is the CEO of the theater. Thank you so much for speaking with me.
Totally a pleasure.
I really appreciate the opportunity to come here and see everything in this historical place in Yakima.
Yeah. Well, and there's no better place that I like to talk about. Well, I'll talk about everything, but yeah.
So, this place was originally constructed in the 1920s.
Yeah, actually in 1920.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so the space was built by the Mercy family. It was built when it was built as the largest venue of its kind in the Pacific Northwest.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it really was a leading facility, and especially for this central Washington region, there's such an emphasis on all of the development of the arts and everything and the culture that was developed on the west side. But this was and has been the premier site in the central Washington region all this time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that it was the largest, so does that mean that you got the biggest acts initially to come through town?
Back in the day, this is 1920, this house was built for two purposes. It was built as a movie house, so the Grand Palaces where everyone gathered to see the latest releases when movies started coming out, which was in the 20s. But it was then also a touring house because vaudeville was alive and well at that time. Now, vaudeville only lasted until the early mid-30s, but in that time period, the vaudeville acts that were coming through. But vaudeville wasn't about the big acts. There wasn't this, like we have with social media now, you don't get the notoriety. You don't have all this way in which people know everyone. And since films were just coming out, we're just then developing this concept of celebrity. You know, people that you see time and time again. So the vaudeville acts that were coming through were about the variety of acts, the variety of talents. You know, people were being introduced to opera for the first time throughout the United States. So you'd have an opera singer, but that was then balanced by the Keystone Cop kind of comic physical acts that were going. Then you'd have, you get all kinds of stories like from, like Let Me Entertain You. You can get some of the shows that you can see, and there went the name, Gypsy. So the movie, that was actually, the burlesque era came out of the vaudeville era. It was what were people's interests, what was their temperament, how were they building. So it was always about the variety. It wasn't until much later that the big movie stars were possible because then you had movies.
Okay.
But those were just being developed. You went from the silent films to the talkies, and the talkies were in the 20s. And then everything started falling apart because the talkies were so much more entertaining. And then you got the big movie musicals in the 30s and the 40s. So yeah, so it was a developing thing.
So I see that there's a lot of seats back here. So back when movies were originally coming about and the talkies were becoming very popular, did movies sell out the entire theater back in the day?
Oh, certainly. This was entertainment, and you'd come in. There are some great pictures, and anyone who's interested in taking a tour, I highly recommend you do. We've got some great pictures downstairs, and one of my favorite is you have clearly a 1920s, early 30s photo, and it's the front of the theater, and they had really deep gutters back in the day, and there is a line of bikes, all lined up in front of the theater. And it's just the kids came in, left their bikes, went into the theater, the show was done, and they came out, grabbed their bikes, and headed off.
That's awesome.
Exactly. And it harkens back to that era where there was that kind of this was the center of things. You could drop off your kids to see a show while you were shopping here, or you're running errands there. All of that was, the theater served as that resource. So it was for the kids, it was for the adults, and it was the kind of thing that you'd fill the house with the entire community coming down, because it was the entertainment. You had radio and you had the Capitol. Yeah. So
was this the only theater in Yakima for a couple of decades?
No, actually the Mercy family had built another one that was torn down shortly after this one was built, because this was the Grand Dame. But these movie houses, these types of halls were far more regular. You have a couple few of them. Now, of this size, this was special. So this was taking it to that next level, putting it on the level of a lot of those East Coast and Midwest Grand Dames, these great big movie palaces. So yeah.
Okay, and you also mentioned that this was the biggest theater in Washington for a long time. How long did?
Oh, not long, not long. Because what was being developed on the west side, because at the same time that this building was being built, there was a similar facility, not quite as large, but just about as large, the Pantages in Tacoma.
Okay.
Which has an interesting relationship with us because that was built, the Pantages Theater Network, so the gentleman Pantages, he was doing it, actually just above us, just below our center cluster of speakers, there's the one face that looks out in the audience. Of all the ornamentation, there's one face that looks out into the audience. That's Mr. Pantages, looking at all the people who have spent money in his theater. But the Pantages Theaters was a style, and they used a lot the same architects, designers, and such as they went across and built facilities. So when we had our fire in '75, we grabbed the molds from that Tacoma theater. Interestingly enough, the organ we used to have in this house also went to the Pantages in Tacoma years before. There was then a fire over there, and that actually burnt in that fire rather than being saved from this fire. But yeah.
So as this theater sort of grew and grew through the 20s and the 30s and the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, the 70s was kind of a very big decade where I guess I'll say that a lot of transitions happened.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about the story of this theater in the 70s?
Well, one of the things that started happening, and so for people of an age, knowing that is we started getting the multiplex. The multiplex concept is when the cinemas, because by that time, this was used as a community space for some concerts. The symphony was already using this space. It was being used for that occasional event that was coming through, but it was also still a cinema.
Okay.
And I use the word cinema a lot more than I use the movie theater. But as a cinema, it started competing, especially within the Mercy family's own development, with the multiplexes that were being developed. Those were those cinemas that had multiple screens, where you could have 300 people in a room, and you had 4 movies to choose from. Now, you've got 12, 14. The multiplexes are amazing, but it meant that people had variety. They had more updated seats. They had better popcorn machines, better vending, all the things that as a contemporary audience they started leaning toward. This space became a secondary space.
Okay.
And also less money was put into it, so a lot of what was happening was this space was deteriorating, like the 50-year-old venues across the country, 50, 80, 100-year-old venues, were losing their specialness. And many of them burned down. Many of them were left, vacant simply because there were other options, and things were moving to the suburbs, things like that. But there was a great deal of effort done to preserve this space and its place in this community. So, 73 or so, they started applying for and worked on the Registry of Historic Places, so the National Register of Historic Places. This became on that registry in that mid-'70s time.
Okay.
Allied Arts, local organization fighting to make certain that the arts had a place in this community, petitioned and got the city to purchase the building from the Mercy family.
Really?
So in '75, the city acquired the building from the Mercy family, and then just a couple months later, it burned down.
Oh no.
So the fire that happened in August of 1975 was odd for a theater, that it didn't happen on the stage where all the technical stuff is happening. It happened in the lobby, probably where the popcorn machine was, an electrical short, and it actually started front of the building and took us all the way this way. So it devastated the building, lost the ceiling, all the beautiful ornamentation, the gorgeous mural, all of this gone, open to the sky. And there was the fire was devastating to the building. There was no loss of life because it was in the middle of the night, but there was one firefighter who was critically injured, paralyzed for the rest of his life in fighting the fire.
Oh no.
So, yeah. So there was a huge, massive, question. What do you do with this space?
Yeah.
An empty hole in the heart of downtown. And immediately civic leaders were climbing over the rubble, grabbing pieces so that they had examples of what the space was.
Okay.
So what they did was they actually went ahead and began the work of reclaiming the space. So they took the pieces as examples. They went to the Pantages in Tacoma. They got molds of the ornamentation, all the elements in the Pantages so they could recreate all of this. This is all original design work.
Oh, wow.
Recreated from its sister facility in Tacoma. So you have these really great pieces that were created out of the molds, and so this wonderful plaster. And
wait, so is this a plaster or a piece of the original?
This is a plaster make from the molds. So this one actually might be original from the way it's all dirty. So you have elements of this which were taken. You can see these two things might actually have been from the rubble. This one was clearly an example that freshly poured from the molds. So these examples of the original recreated so that what they have now is actually what we had then. There were some modifications done to the space. So this is what's called continental seating, when you have no break with an aisle and it's continuous like this. As much as everyone complains, you end up getting more leg room because you're required to have the scooch factor you're to get past. So this was not the original design. It used to have a center section, 2 side sections with aisles. The balcony similarly, but when they rebuilt the balcony, and they really had to rebuild all of that up there from scratch, all new concrete layers. Every row is its own step level, concrete. So that was all that. We can't modify what's up there. We can't put in aisles and the like, but we are looking at how this space will be modified as we look into the future. So yeah, but 1,500 seats. Absolutely amazing space, and the largest of its kind in all of Central Washington, even larger than many of the spaces that you'll find in Spokane and Seattle.
So with the fire, it burned down everything, but there's still a little couple of pieces of the basement that's still around, including signatures that are over 100 years old at this point.
What's amazing, because the fire didn't start on the stage, because it started in the house, it more like the fire curtain worked. It kept the fire from really impacting this part of the stage. It certainly burned down the roof and all of the lines and everything else, but the floor was not scorched, which meant what was under the floor was saved. So all the dressing rooms are all still down there in that same, unfortunately, much the same condition. No, it's an older style of dressing room. They're kind of smaller, but the old laundry room was a space where we have an entire wall, and guest artists coming through would sign the wall. And we have pen and ink, and we have all kinds of signatures back to 1920, all the way to modern day. Because when we have town hall speaker series speakers come in, the ladies from the town hall speaker series bring down the people, and we have last year's signatures on the wall. We have Kareem Abdul-Jabbar down there right alongside Gene Autry, and it's this wonderful. Bob Hope signed down there as well. So. Yeah, we show it on the tours because it is a backstage space. It's not generally open to the public. But again, we encourage people to come for tours just because you get a chance to see all this behind the scenes stuff.
Now, is that something that's been happening ever since the first show, or is there not a signature from day one?
You can see. I don't know what all of the chronological events, so it hadn't been everyone doing it, and it certainly was the 20s, 30s, 40s. When they stopped doing the kind of touring shows more, there's fewer signatures that you'll see in the 50s, 60s, 70s, but then starting in the 80s, you'll start seeing the kinds of David Copperfield, you'll see Ellen Bernstein, you'll have all these people who are in the 80s, 90s, noughts, and 2010s, all that. So we've got a lot of signatures. It's an ever-expanding. It's like we have to keep cleaning more parts of the wall to make more space.
Are you going to sign it?
Oh, well, I don't believe it's my place, as I'm not necessarily the celebrity of the caliber of the stage. So yeah, I'll leave that to the people that people are paying money to see.
You were telling me earlier that initially after the fire, the city council was thinking about making this area into a parking lot?
The city council was not looking at that. However, let me explain. When the fire happened, the city council went to the voters with what's called an advisory vote.
Okay.
So it isn't binding. It's like, what do you think? They want the advice of the voters, always a good thing to do. And they got the advice, and they asked, would you like us to rebuild the theater or to give us a parking lot?
Okay.
And the advice of the voters of Yakima, who are notoriously opposed to change, said, we'd love a parking lot. Okay. Now, you don't have to have somewhere to go, apparently, to have a parking lot, as long as you have a parking lot for when you get there. The city council took the advice, thank you for your advice, and said, theater. Okay. So the advisory vote was to advise, not to direct, And so they took it as a device, and then they explained why they felt, from an economic development perspective, it needed to be a theater. And as a cultural center for this community, used for recitals and graduations, performances, concerts, all the things that happen here, can't imagine there's anyone who could argue that the Capitol Theater hasn't paid off. After these 50 years since the fire, it paid off. There's a really great reason to rebuild. Yes.
And I also heard that the mural, the person who originally painted it in the 20s, came out of retirement to do one last painting, and that's the one you see up there.
Tony Heisbergen. He actually was the interior designer for the entire structure. He had also done a lot of the Pantages buildings. He went on to become one of the most noted interior designers for theaters. And you get great, beautiful examples of his work across the country, especially all the way up and down California. He had done all the interior work, all the colors, all these things were designated by him. When the fire happened, he had done this when he was in his 20s. He came back in his 80s, out of retirement, working with his sons, and worked with them to redo it. And then they redid the mural. And when you come in, I encourage everyone when they come in to look up, because on the left side of the house, or as we say, stage right, up here you see an artist with a bald head, and he's painting. That actually is Tony taking great artistic license. He painted himself into the mural.
That's awesome.
The woman he's painting is his wife, who refused to be painted, so she's turned away. The muse is turned away, and the cherubs flying around are his sons. So he painted his family because he felt such an ownership in this space, such a kinship to this space, that he actually, and artistic license, we love that he did that.
Yeah, that is really interesting.
With a lot of the other pictures. So when the kids come in, it's usually about second grade when the kids are all coming in, kindergarten, first grade, second. It's usually second grade they come in, they finally realize, and they point up and go, boobies, because there's a number of shirtless women up here. So there's an age at which finally kids notice this kind of thing, and then it's suddenly humorous for them. So the mural is always a point of interest for many reasons, but it's a beautiful, beautiful centerpiece for the house, and love that such attention was paid to it.
Yeah, indeed, it is very beautiful.
And one of the things I also recommend to take a look at, if on the mezzanine level behind the bar, there are 2 paintings on either side of the bar that are actually painted onto the wall. Tony actually did those as a gift to the theater. They're big, massive, massive paintings, and he did them as a gift to the theater. So those are there. Yeah,
that's really cool.
Yeah.
In 1978, I believe it was, the theater's just rebuilt, and a couple of A-grade celebrities came over for the grand reopening, right?
The grand reopening was quite the spectacle. So it took 3 years to rebuild, and in and of itself, that's a great timeline to get it all done in that time. But in our poster here, we have a wonderful set of examples of the grand reopening, the opening acts. You have, as MC, for those people of an age, you have Bob Hope. Bob Hope came in and was the MC for this. He was, fortunately, some of the orchardists, some of the people in town who had private planes were able to get him up from California and fly him in for this. For many people, Lawrence Welk, the Champagne music family. Lawrence Welk, had been, at that time, was already famous and had gone on to be even more. But I mean, Lawrence Welk is that wholesome all-Americana, a one and a two, but also Jose Feliciano, another extraordinary artist, representing so much of our current community, bringing in Latino emphasis, but he was an extraordinary artist. So this wonderful mix of things that were all part of this month-long celebration. But it was on Saturday, November 4th, that they actually did the rededication with Bob Hope, celebrating the evening.
Yeah, I heard that was quite the night with a lot of star power. And didn't the governor also come to that?
Oh yeah, it's one of those things when you've got an event as significant as the rebuilding. You had every politician, you had every civic leader, and because they all played such a key role, it was like everyone coming to celebrate because it was such a massive thing, and everyone of course wanted to take part in that, which I loved. Yeah.
And I'm hearing that there's a ghost in these halls as well.
Well, there isn't a theater that doesn't claim its own ghost. We all usually have a ghost and a cat. We don't have a cat. We used to have a cat. We don't have a cat now. But our ghost actually has always been known as Shorty. And Shorty has maintained a presence in the historic space, has not made himself known in our newer spaces on the production side and the studio space, but you can hear stories from the ushers, from the artists, from all alike and the technicians on how Shorty makes himself known. Before the renovations, we actually used to have a space where the organ loft used to be. So the organist would sit and play with a door that could see onto the screen, because a lot of those old silent films, you'd have the organist playing underscore. Yeah. And there'd be a live organist playing to that. Well, we took out the organ, took out the organ loft, but that room was available. Anytime anything went missing, we'd find it in the loft. So, and the door, if you left at the beginning of the day, if you left at the end of the day with the door closed, you'd come back the next morning and the door would be open.
Huh.
There's not a breeze on stage. So if you left it open, it'd be closed. And if you went and things went missing, you'd find them in there. So it was called Shorty's door, and that was Shorty's storage space. Things like that happen all the time. Earrings being tugged, costumes being snagged, all kinds of things that were always attributed to Shorty. I did finally find out who Shorty is.
Who is he? Shorty
was always presented as a technician who hung himself in the theater due to unrequited love from an ingenue, all these great stories, and every old theater ghost story has that kind of drama attached to it. What is the case, though, is Shorty actually was a gentleman who worked at the theater. His name was Shorty McCaud.
Okay.
I always heard McCall, but it's actually Shorty McCaud, M-I-C-H-A-U-D. And Shorty and his wife Crystal lived just a few blocks away. After he had been a bill poster, so he put up bills around town, back in the day when that was something that people did. And he also, after he retired from running an apartment building and being a bill poster, he actually then was a stage technician. Okay. I actually found his death certificate with the help of the archivist over at the museum, over at the library. And we were so excited, and it showed on there his previous employer, his employer was Mercy Industries, the family who used to run the theater.
Okay.
And his occupation was stagehand.
Wow.
So he was known to be. So the reason all this is attributed to Shorty was because he just had a love for this theater, and the thought is that he stuck around to stay engaged.
Have you ever actually seen Shorty?
I have not seen Shorty, but Shorty, after about 8 years, did finally give, because I've been here 10, about a couple years ago, Shorty finally made himself known in a way that we couldn't ignore him anymore. Shorty's persistent. He actually came in one morning, all the lights were on a Monday morning, and so nothing had happened over the weekend. So and we have ways of seeing, we have motion sensors and we have cameras, so we know if anyone's in the building. But apparently, as we went through all of the video for the weekend, trying to find out who'd been in, how did it get turned on, the camera on the side of the stage, showed that at 5:30 on a Sunday morning, the lights came on. And there was no one near the controls, there was no one in the house, there was no one in the building.
Wow.
But apparently at 5:30, the lights of the house just came on. So it's okay, Shorty, thank you. Got it.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. So Shorty has his ways. So we just embrace the fact that we have Shorty here looking over things, giving us some insights every now and again.
And now here we are, 50 years after the fire. How has the Capitol Theater grown since then?
Oh my goodness. What's lovely is this community has recommitted time and again to what this facility means as that cultural heart of Yakima. Back in the early 2000s, my predecessor and the community leaders took on adding the production center on the back end of the theater. So it was just a gravel parking lot behind the stage wall with a tiny door. Now we have this extraordinary production center, which is up to date. It has 2 loading docks that simultaneously can unload the semis as they arrive, because some shows are bringing in 4 and 5 semis, unloading all at one time. Before we built the production center, all those trucks, there was nowhere to go with that stuff except on stage. So they actually had to leave some of the set pieces on the truck because it wouldn't fit on the stage. Now they can unload it all onto the loading dock into the production center. We have these big blast doors across the back of the back wall. And then when the curtain comes down in between scenes, those doors open wide open. They flow in the new sets. They flow out the old sets. And we have all the transitional support that we need, as well as really great up-to-date restrooms, dressing rooms, chorus spaces all on either side. And then they also built the 4th Street Theater. So we have a black box theater with seats about 400 upstairs.
Oh, really?
Massive to have a black box that seats 400. Many theaters nowadays are built with 400 to 600 seats. We've got a black box adjustable multi-purpose kind of space that can seat 400, which is really awesome. So
yeah, that's cool.
So we have, this was all done, so that opened in 2010 with all the great additional opportunities that it provided. And one of the things that's been really notable is in the industry, Yakima has a very special place. As you can imagine, that a lot of what's developed as touring, especially when it comes to the Broadway shows, all happens on the East Coast, because New York, Broadway, it's all there. And all the designers, all of the resources for the actors, it's all there. But there's a lot of times when they're going to start a tour on the West Coast.
Okay.
And it's easier if they bring everything out to the West Coast, rehearse here, work all the technical aspects for about 2-3 weeks, where they bring everyone together, work through everything they need to make certain that everyone is brought together, knows what to do, so that every show thereafter is going like clockwork.
Okay.
If the show is starting on the West Coast, whether that's San Diego up to Vancouver in BC, Seattle, Portland, Yakima is often the place that they're doing that work.
Okay.
Because we have this great production center, we have this glorious studio space to rehearse in, and this amazing stage with this very welcoming audience. You know, the Yakima audiences are wonderful. We get comments from the producers all the time. They're engaged, they're responsive, they actually, you know, cry and laugh in all the appropriate points, but in a way that really does drive the performers, because we're getting the preview performances. We're getting those final moments where they're pulling it all together. And I always say, as a performer myself, I never worried about the first night. Adrenaline will carry you through. You just need that adrenaline. And that's what an audience provides. I always say the second night is always the hardest, because you have this sense that you did it and you can do it, and then the adrenaline is down and it's all on you. So, so the preview performances are important. So we get those, so we get to see it before it premieres in Seattle or LA or Vancouver. So it's really cool.
That really is cool.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for having me here today to speak with you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Roots of the Valley. You can watch all of our other episodes on our YouTube channel, and you can also see new ones coming out on the first and third Sunday of each month. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.